Hey everybody, this is Darwin, and today we're going to talk about three functions very widely used in functional programming. Those are map, filter, and reduce. So map allows us to transform elements in an array, filter filters elements in an array, and reduce makes an operation successively on all the elements of an array to get one single value. These functions allow for very concise programming, and today we'll cover the basics in WINDEV. So without further ado, let's go. Okay, so I'm in WINDEV now, and as you can see, I have already prepared a little support project for our example. So in this little project, what I want to do is to get the details of characters from the beloved Studio Ghibli films. To do so, we will call a web service, and we'll look at the code to see how it did that. So the first thing I did was to declare a structure, right, to store all the information I get from the web service. Let me remind you that the serialize attribute allows me to specify the name of the variable that I'm getting from the web service. So the next thing I did was to declare an array of structures that I'll be using throughout the example. We'll see to store the information about the different characters. And then this Boolean variable over here, it will allow me to determine if an asynchronous process is in progress to show or hide a progress bar. Next, I declared an HTTP request variable, a JSON buffer to store the data in JSON format that I'm getting, and a variable of type st characters to add all the information to the array. I then specify the URL of the web service. Here it is. And then I use the send method, right, to call the web service. And as you can see, I specify the name of a callback that I declared right below. And of course, I call the web service asynchronously to avoid blocking the user while the process is completed. Remember that asynchronous web service calls are an available feature starting with version 26. So in the callback, the first thing I want to do is to check for errors, right? And if everything is all right, if I get the code 200, I will loop through the array, right, through the JSON file, sorry, to get the information I need to finally refresh the table, the window that I'm using to display the information. So here in the loop, you see I reset the variable, I deserialize the information I get in JSON format, and finally I add that information into my array. So there we go. Now the function request refresh UI is calling the process right here. So as you can see here, I determine if I show or hide the progress bar, and I specify the table that I'm going to refresh once once the process is finished. So that's basically it, right? Let's run our test and see how it goes. Beautiful. So as you could see, it was a little bit of loading. I showed my infinite progress bar while the information was being loaded. And what I get is this table with all the information about the characters. So I have an identifier, I have the name of the character, I have the gender, the age, eye color, and hair color, right? I have this data in an array of structures, but now what we need to do is to handle the data, to perform operations with it, and that takes us to our first case, which is map. So let's say that out of all this information, I need to get only the IDs, for example. So we won't cover basic iterative methods such as for each, as you are probably already familiar with those. What we want here is to get certain bits of information, like the identifier, And to do so, we will use the map function. All right, so let me close this test window and we'll go back to the main window, the map button. Now we go into the code. So the first thing we want to do is, well, specify our array, of course, and we will call the map function. Beautiful. We will explore different syntax options with the map function. The first option is specifying the name of a procedure that will be called for each element in the array. So let's call it getID. Great. So right below this line, I will create an internal procedure, right? The name is, of course, getID. And it takes a structure as a parameter. I'm going to call this structure a character. I'm going to declare that it is of type SD characters. There we go. And I simply want to get the identifier, so I'm going to specify that. The member I'm interested in is as character ID. Great. Now let me go back to the first line to declare an array of strings that will retrieve these identifiers. Okay, so I'm going to call it character ID. So it's array of strings. Great. And I simply want to perform a loop to display the identifier, right? So I'll use for each ID, that's what I want to get, of our character ID. Great. Show me in a trace window the ID, right? So let's see how that works. So I have my complete list of characters. Now when I click on map, I get a trace window with the different identifiers. Great. That is exactly what we were looking for. So we're just getting that bit of information in a trace window. Cool. So that's how you use the map function with an internal procedure. Now we can go back to the code and explore other syntax options. So I'm going to delete the internal procedure. Okay, and over here I'll pass a parameter to the map function. I'm going to call it film character. I then use the equal greater than syntax to indicate the result of the transform operation, right? So I write the code between braces. So I want to get the ID, it's character ID. Very good. Let's run our code again. So I have all my information. I click on map and I get the identifiers in my trace window, right? So that is another syntax option we have. So back to the code, we can simplify this line of code even more. The return keyword and the braces are optional. I can simply get rid of them just like this, right? Now I have this cleaner line of code. If I run the test, click on map, the result is exactly the same, right? So that's another possibility. Let's take a moment to look at this second syntax with the return keyword and the braces, right? Because there are many interesting things, useful things that we can do with this syntax. Let's say that I declare a little string over here. I'm going to say x string, right, equals. That's my little string over here, and I then use a colon to specify that this is a different line of code, right? And in the result, I'm going to use my little string right before the result. Okay, so here I declare my string, my line of code stops here, and this new line of code includes my string. So let's run our test and see what happens. Click on map. Beautiful. So as you can see, the string I just specified, as I just declared, id equals, is used before every result. So that's something you can do with the map function. All right. So this operation is completely optional, of course, but it gives us a little glimpse of the possibilities of this syntax option, right? And that's it for the map function. Okay, so now let's talk about the filter function. So as you can imagine, this function is used to filter elements in an array. So I'm going to run our window to show you what I mean. We have our table, right, with all the information, but let's say that out of all these results, I want to get only characters that are female, for example. So to do so, we'll go to the code of the filter button. So back to our window, filter, let's open the code, and of course, the array we're working with is these characters, and I am going to call the filter function. All right, so just like what we saw for the map function, I can create a procedure or use a lambda expression. So in this case, I'm going to use a lambda expression. As a parameter, I'm going to use film character. Then the equal greater sign to specify the operation I want to make. And then I'm going to use film character with member as gender. And I'm going to specify that I want to get only characters that are female, right? Given that the resulting array and the initial array have the same structure, I can perform a direct assignment. So I go to the beginning of the line, and I'll do this, plain and simple, right? Finally, I simply want to call the request refresh UI function to refresh our table. So there we go, right? Let's try our filter, see how it goes. So we get all the results, and when I click on filter, great, I get out of all the results, I get only characters who are female. So all the records that matched my condition. Very good. So back in the code, something really useful is that I can use multiple conditions. For example, I can retrieve only characters that are female and that have black eyes, for example. So I will simply go to the end of my filter criteria here. I'm going to use and. I'm going to use the same structure, film character, this time around with the SI color, remember? I'm going to specify I want characters with black eyes. Very good. Now let's see how that goes. Click on filter. Great. So we get only female characters with black eyes. So those are only the results that match our filter criteria, right? So that's a very clear example of what you can do with the filter function, right? So let's move on to reduce. This function allows us to perform calculations successively on all the elements of an array. So let's say that I want to get the maximum age among characters, all the characters in the list, all right? So let us go to the reduce button and open the code. So as usual, I specify our array, right? And I'm going to call the reduce function. So this function expects a structure that I will call film character, and I will get the result of the max operation for the previous record. So I need to specify that somewhere. I'm going to call that result hmax. Very good. Next, I will use the equal greater sign syntax, and I will write the operation I want to perform. So I want to get the maximum age among all the characters in the table, and for that I'm going to call the max function. So I'll pass the film character structure, the member we're looking for, which in this case is age, right? And the last result return, you know, the little comparison that was made right before, I'm going to get that, and that's what I called hmax. Very good. So please bear in mind that we need a second parameter, right? Which is, let's say, the reduce function. It starts with a value, compares with the following, and out of those it takes one, compares with the following, and out of those takes one value, and so on and so forth. So we need to pass an initial value, something to compare to start the operation. So that's for the case of age, as we're talking about numbers, we're going to use 0. Okay? Very good. Okay, so lastly, I need to see the result of this operation, so I'm going to use the trace function to display the result in a little trace window. All right, so let's run our code. Here we are, and once we hit reduce, very good. So out of all the ages, the reduce function got us one single value, and that is the maximum age among all the characters in the list. And that's a character with with an age of 400, a 400-year-old character. There we go. So the goal here is to show you an example of the reduce function. Let us not forget that the W language already includes aggregation functions to get sums, averages, etc. Right? So that's going to be it for the reduce function. Okay, so now let us talk about the combination. It's an interesting, useful possibility of these functions is that you can use multiple operations in one single line of code. So let me show you how to combine those operations. Let's say we want to get the maximum age among male characters with brown hair, right? So those are our conditions. So to do so, let me go to the filter button, and I'm going to copy the code, right? I will simply go and paste it in the combination button, right? So I'm going to modify our conditions. So we said male characters with brown eyes, sorry. With brown eyes, very good. I will remove the assignment, I no longer need it. Very good. And now I can go right to the reduce function, And what I'll do is that I will copy the code right here. I will go to the combination button again, go to the end of my line, and paste that line of code, plain and simple. Very good. We can try that right away. Of course, I want to show this. I want to show this result in a little trace window, of course. Nice. So now I'll do the combination, and what we get is 37. Very good. Which means out of all the male characters with brown eyes, if I'm not mistaken, the character with the maximum age is 37 years old. There you go. So that's a good example of how you can combine the different operations, right? And the major advantage of this syntax is that your code is much more concise. You know, all the operations, we managed to fit them into one line of code. And you also avoid the need to declare intermediate variables. However, there is one downside to it, and it is that the code becomes a little bit harder to read, especially when it comes to maintenance later on, and that's something to bear in mind. All right, so those are our functions, and that's going to be it for today's webinar. So I hope you guys have found it useful. Thank you very much for watching. If you did find this webinar helpful, don't hesitate to hit that like button and to stay tuned for more webinars like this. So also feel free to subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you have any questions, you can contact us at info@windev.com, right, for any additional questions or additional information you may need. Guys, thank you very much for watching. I'll see you on the next one.